Hello and welcome to the Old Garage number 10. I'm Wild Bill, and we have some questions from the last couple of episodes, as well as one that I totally forgot about. And so I'm going to get to that one first. And that was by Vaclafate, who asked, what music genre is most populated with automotive lyrics in English or any other language you care for? Is it surf rock, Little Deuce Coupe 409, Little Honda, country, One Piece at a Time, or some other? Do you have a favorite genre or song? Well, surf rock, you basically mentioned the Beach Boys. I am not, and don't pretend to be, a musical historian. So really that question's outside of my league. But when it comes to the vintage era, there's probably one person that comes to mind, and that is Billy Murray. Billy Murray, not Bill Murray, but just Billy Murray. He started out in vaudeville. He was a very popular recording artist, back in the days before there was even radio. He wrote a lot of songs, or recorded a lot of songs. My Merry Oldsmobile was one of them. Gasoline Gus was another one. By the Headlights was another one. He also did one called The Little Ford Rambles Right Along. And in fact, the intro song for my Vintage Car History episodes, I very much based on his work. I tried to use his type of vocals, the way he would have, done the melody, etc. But in the vintage era, yeah, Billy Murray, he was the guy for music. Okay, now I've got a whole bunch of stuff from James MacArthur. He's been all over the place. And he's asking, for the early gasoline-powered cars, what were the typical ranges of operation? How far could they go? And to be honest, the range of a gasoline car is really based on the range of your gas stations. It had a lot to do with the size of your gas tank, quite frankly, and the type of vehicle that you were buying. The range of a gasoline car, typically just off of its own tank, we're talking prior to 1900, maybe 100 miles. Not that they couldn't be made with more, but at that point, why? Why would you build something with a larger tank, to go further? Once you start, getting past, in 1900 into the 20th century, gasoline cars obviously outranged everything. But I think your question is really more about the infrastructure. If you, go one place, are you going to be able to gas up? And that's a question that is going to vary country to country, region by region. It's just what resources they actually had to supply, gasoline. So, that's ultimately where it runs to. Let's see. Now he also asked again. Okay, gasoline was used to power motors. Yeah. Did it have any other uses back in the late 1890s or early 1900s? I could see some snake oil salesmen saying it could cure a whole lot of ailments. Sorry, still getting over that cold. Gasoline was not originally sold as a fuel. It was, in fact, originally distilled in the 1870s as a cleaning agent. And, pardon me, and that's how it was advertised and used. The fact that it was volatile was known, but really, gasoline was invented before the engines that could really use it, because it was already seen as an excellent emulsifier. That being a a compound that will break down other compounds, and therefore excellent for cleaning. And that's what it was used for. That's what it was advertised for, and that was reasonable. Okay, supercharged 350. You got to tell me, what kind of supercharger you're using. Who invented the first shock? What was it put on first, and what inspired the need for them, etc. Shock absorbers. There's a whole list of things that were invented during this era. Shocks is one of them. I think that when you say shock absorbers, the way that we think of them, the tower shocks that you would put into a car now, they were not really part of the vintage era, but the whole progression of what caused suspension to come into be. I mean, these are things that I actually am going to make episodes about once I get done with all the founding fathers. But to answer your question specifically, you're not going to see tower shocks until the 1930s. Prior to then, you're going to have springing, you're going to have dampers, you're going to have different types of tires. There are a number of ways. I mean, independent front suspension, for example, was invented in 1898. So it's not like suspension, etc., wasn't thought of. It's just that type wasn't come out until quite late. A good question, though. But I'll get to it. Don't worry. All right. Also had from Craig Hagenbruch. I hope I said that right. Could you please do a special on the invention of the seat belts? It's pretty fascinating, interesting to know. Originally for gliders, eventually made its way into the automobile. It's really outside of the era. They were used in some racing in the vintage era, but as standard equipment or even thought of as reasonable on a car, that didn't happen during the vintage era at all. But we can talk about it perhaps later. But that's, again, go to what Tucker was doing. Some of the early work by Chrysler in the 1950s. And you're right about the connection with hang gliders, but it did not infect the early automotive industry, the vintage era, in any way, in any significant way. Okay, let's see. I have a question from the garage. This is from Carter. He says, I notice a lot of vintage cars use different sized wheels or rims on the front and back, usually bigger than the rear. Was this due to gearing or suspension or what? Well, you know what? That actually still continues to this day, especially in sports cars. The fact is that a wheel that is small takes more revolutions per minute to move you a distance than a wheel that is larger. So if you have an engine that can move a large wheel, then the bigger wheel, the better. This is it's just simple, basic mechanics, basic engineering. If you have a car in the vintage era that has an engine that's, powerful enough to only do so much, well, put a bigger wheel on in the back, it will drive it faster. The same is true in early locomotives. The bigger the drive wheels, the faster the speed. So when you see the larger wheels to the rear on those cars, those are going to be the drive wheels, and they're larger because they want it to go faster because of them. It's just simple physics. And you'll see that in cars with 22s to the rear and 20s to the front. You go to the drag strip, you got massive wheels in the back and little wheels in the front. Same principle. All they're doing is bigger wheels makes bigger spin, makes go faster. You just have to have an engine that will get them going fast quickly. In the early era of automotive industry, you may not have had an engine that could get them going quickly fast, but if the wheels are big enough, you will be able to go faster once the engine can, build up the speed. So, good question. Daniel Silverthorne, he asked this one. any chance we would eventually get the history of motorcycles? He asked that, and then he asked another one about, and how nobody noticed how horrible the designs of Edward Pennington were. Well, will I get into the history of motorcycles? I'll be honest, it's a whole different discipline. In the same way the commercial trucks are. There is some convergence. I am going to be talking about motorcycle manufacturers as they converge with automobiles, but it's really not where my expertise is. So I'm afraid, not really, no. I'm sorry. As far as anybody noticed, well, yeah, all of his engineers at Daimler told Harry Lawson, you're an idiot for doing this. He was notified a lot of times. That was the thing about Harry, is that he was literally just bum scambled by this dude. And he got taken. He absolutely got taken. I know when I did the episode about Harry Lawson, I think that was episode number 9, I had to do something about Edward Pennington, because the reason why Harry Lawson failed was because of Pennington. And he lost everything. He never recovered from it. He was done after that. Ended up in prison for fraud, trying to actually do what Pennington did, but he wasn't as good. So, yeah. In fact, the last question I have ties into that. James MacArthur asks again. Says, kind of sad that in every industry there are Penningtons. Yeah. I wonder if there's anyone who tried to warn Lawson. Yeah, they did, as I mentioned. Did Lawson ever bounce back? No. He was done. Oh man, what Pennington did to Lawson was just wrong. I know Vaclav Fate, mentioned the Dale and everything of that, but that was in the 70s, so, outside of the purview of this show. But yeah, that was, what went on there was just wrong. Okay, but it happened. And it wasn't the only time that shady stuff happened. We'll hear more about it on the channel. But in any case, that was the questions we have for today. Stay tuned for the next one. Hey, I'll ask it anyway. Like and subscribe if you care to. If you don't, okay, just let me know why you hate me. And I'll see you next time on The Old Garage. Peace.